Now, when you say socially progressive yet capitalist, does that mean like the Elizabeth Warren of libertarians, or what? Like, forgive my ignorance, but I don't quite know like what the comparison point necessarily would be. Like, if we move everything on the political compass like down, so to speak, because they're all rather statist authoritarians to one degree or another, but like if we move them all down the line, I don't know like what politician you might line up closest with in your mind.
As far as actual active elected politicians, that's not really much of a choice. There aren't many libertarians to choose from in the first place, and those that are not, don't really line up exact. If you're familiar with the Cato Institute, that would be pretty close to what I am.
So, like,
Gotcha.
the Andrew Yang.
Yang.
Come on now. If there's one thing that can unite this vast political spectrum, it's UBI is a let's just push that away. Come on now. We all deserve better.
But yeah, if you're asking kind of what I think distinguishes my brand from other brands, is that with like the Ron Paul kind of libertarianism and stuff like that, they're more than happy to work alongside paleo conservatives so long as they support tax cuts and gun rights. I'm not happy to work along with them. The vast majority of posts on my page are specifically targeted at how we should not associate with those kind of people and make alliances with them. I think that it's very, very important that libertarians acknowledge concepts like systemic racism and patriarchy and things like that, and try to, the entire ideology of libertarianism, as I see it, is built on the foundational belief that all people are equal and deserve equal treatment and equal rights. So that doesn't just apply to treatment by the government. It's if you believe all people are equal, you should believe they should all be treated equal in the social sphere as well. And that's something that I think a lot of right libertarians especially miss.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, it's as with most things, it can even almost be wolf in sheep's clothing, where they might present themselves as right-wing libertarians, but like in actuality, when you start scratching the surface, some really weird policy ideas start spewing out that aren't quite on the
well, yeah, hierarchies are good, so especially when you get down into it and you talk about the hierarchies of skull shape and jaw development.
Yeah, and so much of their talking points come from just conservatism, because the vast majority of libertarians, especially capitalist libertarians, are ex-Republicans, ex-conservatives. I'd say still current conservatives, but so just even on policy areas where I agree with them, the justification is usually different, or at least presented in a way that I don't agree with. Like that they would, some of them would oppose welfare because they think poor people are just lazy and should just go get a job, and I completely disagree with that framing, even if the policy we would support at the end of the day might be similar. But I disagree with usually their motivations and their characterization of the problem in the first place.
I went and got lunch with my aunt today, and I haven't seen her in a while, and so the podcast came up, and I had to mention this about politics, and it was immediately a bad decision, because we're both like, yeah, like I'm not necessarily left or right, I'm like third party. She's like, absolutely, both sides are bad, and I'm like, oh no. They are, but
big time centrist.
Well, I mean, it also works in another way of where, like, someone can be like, yeah, I mean, capitalism has failed us. And you're like, okay, all right, like, let's see what this person has to say. And then, like, it's either going to be, like, an extremely socialist ideology or an incredibly fascist one. And you're just like, all right, let's flip the coin.
Normally, you would assume it'd be the former, but the latter seems to be picking up traction with, the Tucker Carlson types these days.
He legitimately scares me. I mean, like, if honestly,
I had to say, like, I mean, this is no praise of him whatsoever, but I honestly think that his mold is the future of the Republican Party.
I completely agree.
I think fusionism is completely unraveling before our eyes, and the departure of people like Justin Amash from the Republican Party, excuse me, and so many of the more moderate, more kind of socially liberal Republicans declining to even run for office again, because they just know that it's not possible to be elected in the modern Republican Party unless you're basically fascist or fascist light. Oh. It's just we're seeing the unraveling of the fusionist movement that's been the foundation of the Republican Party for decades, where social conservatives have pretended for some reason that they care about capitalism, and capitalists have pretended that they care about conservatism, when really there was no, in my view, any logical connection between the two. And I think people are starting to see that now. Like Tucker Carlson, for what he wants, I think he is correct in saying that capitalism does not serve his purposes, and I mark that as a badge of honor. But capitalism is a globalist, ultimately, phenomenon, and he doesn't want that. It's the logical extension of capitalism would be to support things like, complete unilateral free trade and open borders and things like that, and he doesn't want those things and realizes that capitalism does not serve him, so he's turning away from it now. And I think that more Republicans in the post-Trump era will continue to do that.
Yeah, I mean, he's literally too much of a nationalist to be a true capitalist, which
is
just a weird way to view him, because at least in the circles I run in, there's a growing number of people who are socially regressive and yet identify on the economic left side.
Yeah,
and
those are there's a not insignificant portion of the Bernie base, I would say, is like that, where if they see things like anti-racism or feminism as distractions to the class struggle more than something that's actually important, they see it as just liberal distractions.
Which is an interesting...
Zach, I'm not sure whether or not we can flame people on this, so let me know.
I was about to guide this into, it's interesting that, a lot of that pops up on, this, one small-time podcast, Chapo Trap House, and some of their fringe members that may or may not also be socially regressive, and partly to blame for people radicalizing economically, but not radicalizing socially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when you have people like Amy Therese and then Anna from Red Scare, and then, I mean, even Amber from Chapo herself. I mean, okay, I'm not going to levy straight up accusations and say they're completely regressive, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, they are much closer to Tucker Carlson than I think they would want to admit. And I think Tucker Carlson is much closer to them than they would want to admit. But 30 years on down the line, I would not be surprised at all if some weird mutation of the Republican Party has Amber Lee Frost introducing Tucker Carlson to accept the nomination.
I mean, it seems this is like a kind of neoliberal take that, at least on Twitter, a lot of people on the left especially don't like, but I see a lot of similarities between the Trump movement and the Bernie movement, and I think they both share the fundamentals of populist nationalism, and it wouldn't surprise me if they one day find that they have a lot more in common than they think they do, and that they form some kind of alliance based on that at some point.
The thing that I was thinking about was that, for every Stalin, there always ends up being a Khrushchev. Whether or not you like Stalin or not, I mean, I personally am not that big a fan, but everyone can pretty much, unilaterally agree that the Khrushchev after Stalin was worse, even though he came on the idea of reforms and all these other things. He, was a photocopy, so to speak. And so that with Trump and Bernie, it's not even them necessarily. When you're discussing something, it's the movement behind them. It's who they're going to inspire, who's going to take their place next with it. So I mean, it's not just looking into their personal life. It's looking into
the movement they've inspired, or who's going to carry the torch of what they've started.
Yeah, exactly. Because they could end up being further, or they could end up being more to the middle. but it's a real gamble with any movement.
Which is why I think it's really awesome that specifically focusing on justification versus outcomes in terms of who you're allying with is a very cool phenomenon that we get to be a part of. Because we're not just allying ourselves with other people, other people thoughtlessly that also support like X, Y, Z outcome, like you're saying about, welfare. We're worried about where those people are coming from, because as we ally with them, we need to be sure that we're building something that is sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, you could be supporting similar policies for completely different reasons. The motivation's almost maybe as important as the actual policy is. There, like, I made a graphic once that I think I posted on one of the Facebook groups or something that a lot of people didn't like, but it was an intersection, highlighting the intersection of policy agreement between libertarians and the alt-right, and then the complete difference in justification between the two groups supporting those policies, and why we need to be so vigilant and not just saying, oh, this guy, supports X policy, I also support. He probably does it for the same reason that I do. Like, that we need to not make those assumptions, or we're going to end up with bedfellows that we really do not want to have.
That's exactly how you end up with a Night of Long Knives type scenario taking place. And in general, history doesn't look favorably on what follows after events like that. So perfect.
In Garage.
I know that we talk specifically about bottom unity. Shout out to Lizzie on Twitter. And so
you're not gonna let that go.
I'm really not. That my that one person I follow on Twitter, Lizzie. This episode we're hoping to kind of dive a little bit deeper into what bottom unity is made up of, maybe explore some of the ideas that we agree on, explore some of the ideas that we maybe disagree on a little bit, and get a better understanding of where we stand. Sam is with us here today.
Well, I am Sam Coppinger. I'm the sole administrator of the page Libertarian Memes for Neoliberal Teens. And as I've mentioned earlier, I don't know how much of what we were talking about earlier is going to get cut or not, but my page tries to promote a cosmopolitan, socially progressive version of capitalist libertarianism.
Kelton is also joining us.
Yo, what's up, people? It's me. You know where to find me.
Absolutely. You know where to find us. If you're listening to us, tell your friends about us. But let's go ahead and dive in. Today we're going to be talking about a fun little topic, very light, easy discussion. Open borders in America. What are they? Why are they? Where are they?
Open borders. That's that thing that Tulsi Gabbard says that all the Democratic candidates are in favor of, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And
gotcha.
And Andrew Yang just gets up on stage and raves for hours about his UBI and how he's going to open borders.
I mean, I just thought that he was trying to reopen several bookstores, but win some, lose some, I guess, Andrew.
I don't know if you guys ever ate at the Borders Cafe, but I remember going there when I was a kid, and that's really what America is about. So I think our docket is kind of a loose outline, but we wanted to start with the authority behind enforcing borders, specifically the roles of governments in the lives of citizens, how and when they can restrict travel of their citizens and of other nationals in their land. I think for me personally, there is definitely a power struggle that we are already engaged in, and so it's gonna be really rough to bring this as a talking point to your casual family dinners, but but the ability of the state to restrict travel is something that just doesn't sit with the ideals of free exchange, the ideals of self-determination of not only citizens, but then how do aside from unilateral like treaties between massive countries, how do we justify restricting other nationals from moving through our land, and why would we stop people from working, like coming and spending time with us? I mean, I understand that I need borders for I need a wall between my house and my parents' house so that my mom can't just freely travel.
I mean, borders are just for countries with intimacy issues, I think is what we're getting at, right? I guess it really kind of boils down to getting into the origin of borders. Like we all know what borders are. This land is my land, this land ain't your land, blah 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 blah, or however the song goes. But I get it, I understand. Okay, like different lyrics, it's fine though. But it's an important thing, I think, to be discussing, because we, at least on this podcast and amongst ourselves, would probably put ourselves on or among the bottom left. And Sam, would it be safe to assume that you put yourself somewhere on the bottom right side of the quadrant? Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
I don't know. Right about in the center of the bottom right quadrant.
Nice. Sam is the designated centrist now that I will be calling on when I am getting attacked by Nazis on Twitter. So good times. Sorry for having to draft you into the great meme war, Sam, but allies. It's
already
very
a veteran.
needed. So the thing though to focus on, at least in my mind, is the concept of if you're on the left or the right. It also matters whether or not you're on the top or the bottom. As Zach was mentioning earlier with bottom unity, people on the bottom have a belief in no borders, and that exists outside the realm of what you want to place value on, be it capital, be it labor, I don't know, gummy bear reserves, whatever the fuck you decide to choose as the thing that you hold near and dear and true to your heart. People on the bottom have what I'd like to think is the correct view when it comes to borders. And so I think having a discussion about how we can all see this and what's going on with borders is vitally important, because at the beginning it all started with tribalism, and there's only so much saber-tooth meat and Ray Romano woolly mammoth husks that you can eat for yourself. But I like to think that we've moved past that a little bit.
Yeah, and once we turned from hunter-gatherer to more agricultural societies, we started to have this field is my field, this barn that all my stuff is stored in is mine, and I will hurt you if you touch it. And that's the basis of violence, is the basis of most human practices. So.
But even then, that was still based in the concept of personal property.
Yeah, that's
which evolved
more of
into
a personal or even private property kind of concept. Whereas borders are on a far different scale, where it's an involuntary collective asserting property rights over a particular area, usually guarded by a might is right kind of perspective. So.
Right.
It's like neighboring fiefdoms, and the serf on one side of the line is like, listen, I can't hand you my plow because you're on the wrong side of the line, and I'm going to have to invade you someday, and that's going to be real bad, and I don't know if I'm going to get my plow back, basically. It'll make things real awkward between us, so we're just going to focus on our own sides here, even though it would be obviously more beneficial to us if we were to work together and ignore this weird, arbitrary line in the sand state apparatus.
I like the English tradition of having the giant rock that marks, the border of your land, and at that point, it's just whoever can pick up the rock and move it determines, what the border actually is. That was the Scottish Games were about, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That and giving Mel Gibson inspiration, I think.
Yeah. So
like someday an Australian will look back at this culture and think, perfect, this will bring me back into the spotlight.
Christ. So we're a little bit past the part of history where kingdoms and their armies fought each other for control of lands.
Are we?
Yeah. Now we just have what should we call it? Quote unquote democracies that invade each other in the name of resources, right? Totally different.
We're totally past invading at this point. It's just democracies that drone strike the country that the other one wishes they could invade.
Yeah, I mean, come on now. Like, Obama and John Bolton are gone. Like, who's left? No one's going to drone strike anyone. We're fine now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once we stopped using, men and horses to maintain kingdoms and collect gold, and more serfs to grow more wheat to feed bigger armies, it really turned into much, the economic aspects of borders became much more pronounced after industrialization. Once there are, factories and workers that work in those factories and live in those factories, and contribute
in those factories.
Look, it's a 6th generation factory, okay? Nobody's seen the light of day since our great grandpappy came in here. It became a lot more about economic power. After it became more pronouncedly about economic power. It was always about economic power because we've as citizens we've allowed our power to be invested into the exchange medium that we use, because it's convenient for us and it also benefits the people that have access to more of it. And so as we industrialize, as we've modernized and we've improved, the communication that we have across the globe, the ability of the individual to interact with other people anywhere on Earth, we've also increasingly had to define more and more strictly what our borders are. Especially as we interact with people in such different places. As we exchange, goods and currency with them, we've had to create more and more laws and more guidelines around how those interactions take place.
I mean, it almost seems counterintuitive that the more flat the world becomes and the more globalist and integrated everything evolves into, we still find ways to divvy things up and be so divisive.
In the time where our cultures are most integrated, we have the most ruthless border security and patrol and ways to keep people out, when, if anything, even by arguments that protectionists use now, you'd think there'd be more of a justification for open borders now than ever before.
But I mean, on the plus side, several retirement communities in South Texas are getting border walls built right through their golf course areas. So, I mean, can we really say that borders are all bad, I guess?
Build that wall. No, just that one. Only that wall. Like,
yeah,
2 miles.
They're really mad. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, just 2 miles max. Like, that's all we need. We don't need $1 trillion for that.
They're really, really mad. Not at the fact that the wall got built, but that, the course, that hole went from a par 3 to a par 6. This really throws everything off.
Yeah, and even for protectionists, what do borders protect nowadays?
I mean, realistically speaking, I don't think that borders themselves actually protect much.
It's the idea. That's why so many people support the wall, even though they know, or maybe they don't know, but they ought to know that that's not even how most immigrants get in, and you could go around it, you could go over it. But it's the symbolism of the wall, which I would argue is just a symbolism of white nationalism. It's a asserting identity as who we are and who is not part of us.
Yeah, which, going back to, or what I mentioned in the intro, outcomes versus justification. It's more about, this is what my ideology insists upon, rather than this is the best way to do this.
I do have a legitimate question about the wall, and I would be interested to hear what y'all's opinion is. I mean, with how hard it is for Trump to acquire funding, and the main, Democratic response being seemingly like the obligatory mouth service about how, oh no, this isn't who we are, even though United States history begs to disagree, but then they also say like, oh well, I mean, it would cost too much money. Like, how far away are we to actually having Trump start using prison labor on like an amazing like reform system, quote unquote, of being at like 6-1, like 6 days served for every 1 day of prison labor, utilized to actually build the wall? Because I want to think that that's not possible, because that's just straight up out of every little dumb 14-year-old Hunger Game novel. But it really seems like as long as we got Kanye blasting on the speakers, people will be like, oh, it's fine.
That doesn't seem especially far-fetched to me.
I need to tweet at Kanye West right now. Where is Kim Kardashian? They need to be proposing this to Trump every day for the next 3 years.
But I mean, the things that we already are seeing with the concentration camps on the borders, that seems more far-fetched to me than the use of prison labor toward an already stated political goal. It's not like prison labor isn't something that we've already seen before, supported by both Republicans and Democrats. That really doesn't seem that far-fetched to me.
Yeah.
God, can you imagine him like pushing it as like, this is actually prison reform?
Yeah, that it could be people who are otherwise in solitary or something like that, but sell it as a progressive reform that you're getting these people out in the sunlight,
and they would be getting paid, and it's a work history, and
here's a like cross proposal for appeal to populists of all stripes. That the left wants a jobs guarantee. How about this would be their New Deal jobs guarantee program, is to sign up and build the wall. $15 an hour to build the wall.
Joe Rogan pulling up a study on recidivism, people that go to prison, and how often they get on welfare. And arguing that that in order to get more people off of welfare, we need to give prisoners jobs.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the real way to do it, And then like, if we're all working on the wall, then what happens when we run out of border? Well, I already got the answer lined up. Y'all ready? We build a wall on top of the wall. It's even taller. It's doubly effective. Okay, it's perfect. It's a victimless crime. Right?
Who needs the Rocky Mountains? Just use those for the wall. Just giant mining operations chomping away at the Rocky Mountains.
I mean,
God,
you're giving him ideas that I don't think are that far outside the scope.
Jesus.
What if he flattens the tip tops of the Rockies, and then he puts wind farms on the tip top?
No, he hates wind farms, remember? That's one thing that he has
that's the compromise. You're right.
Stance on, is that he does not like windmills. He says they ruin his view at his golf course. And he would have you believe that they're just an absolute holocaust for birds as well. That's how he tries to get the progressives on board, but fear mongering about the wildlife.
The Birds is a very good band, and they are notorious for their windmill phobia. Is that where we're going with that?
I'm learning all about new phobias. The Apple iPhone, or just the Apple event, happened, and people are freaking out because it has 3 cameras on
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And they're like, this is triggering my trigophobia. I'm like,
Is that like fear of
Come on,
holes
people.
or clustered circles or whatever it is?
fear of triangles. it's fear of triangles,
Okay.
Sam, and it is. I try to be an open-minded individual.
Trypophobia is the one with like all the holes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. I don't know what you think the bird song "Turn, Turn, Turn" is about.
It's 3, Zach. Don't you understand?
Yes, absolutely. And the new windmills have 3 arms on them.
It's all coming together. I see.
See all that acid they did in the 60s.
Gonna have to ask him what he thinks of Phil Jackson's triangle offense.
Sports ball. Now,
Yes, move right along.
yeah, I think there are some arguments for not specifically borders, but at least movement of people, materials across the globe. One I could think of immediately was ecological zones and invasive species, and how there is some justification for wanting to make sure that we don't just let a bunch of highly
We've
highly
all read your
predatory-
zebra mussel and Chinese tallow fan fiction, Zach. It's fine.
Okay, highly predatory plant and animal life, just running rampant in environments where it has no natural predators.
Mhm.
I think that's a discussion that people smarter than us should have about how we would limit stuff like that moving across the world. There is in making societies work, there is cultural. There are cultural segregation. Societies work better when they're cohesive as a culture.
That's just about the top alt-right, justification.
Well,
Yeah, I think what Sam was getting to though is that's a notion that may have even let's assume that it's true to begin with. Okay, let's take that initial leap of faith. I highly doubt that it's still true in the era of the internet in most places, because I mean, people are now getting nostalgia for a TV show that's a remake of a TV show that's referencing the 50s, and it's not working anymore. Age is almost being eroded, and so is the concept of oh well, this is where I live. Driving from Texas to Kansas doesn't make me think, oh, I'm driving through all these separate zones. And so the idea of going, from North Dakota into, forgive me, Canadian listeners, I'm so sorry, Alberta? No, that's too far to the east. Anyway.
Saskatchewan, I think, would be north.
There we go. See? I'm a dumb internet guy who talks and makes jokes, and this is why we have smart people on to help me and make sure that my ramblings don't sound absolutely insane. So the idea, though, of there being a cultural hegemony between this is South Dakota culture, we're nothing like you people up in Canada. I mean, it's ridiculous to think about, but it's especially ridiculous when we now have access to pretty much everything, everywhere.
just want to say thanks, gig economy, for ruining the idea of U.S. nations and separate cultures. I could move from Texas to New York next week for a job, and you'd never know it. I'd blend right in up there.
We would know it, Zach. Me and Sam would know it. We would be like, it's really weird, why you're starting to now say Chapo isn't all that problematic. And hey, those Cumtown guys are raising some pretty valid points between ribs.
Weed ain't all it's hopped up to be. Have you ever tried cocaine?
No, you would jump straight to heroin.
Aw.
Come on. You'd be like, I gotta be a cool Brooklyn hipster. Borders aren't real.
And neither is that, whatever that thing is, but I can see it. So anyways, can I take your coffee order today?
Well, I mean, actually, speaking, good God, but like speaking of New York as an example, people who don't live in New York, when we talk about New York City, we talk about New York City as one group. And let me know if I'm alone in this. But then, if you talk to someone who's actually from New York, they act like there is this huge difference between Queens and Brooklyn and Manhattan and Staten Island and all that, which, again, I'm sure there is. But really, it's something that people are on the inside think about is differences. Now, if you were to apply that same sort of like insider mentality, but apply that to nation states, that's how ridiculous the concept of borders are. Like, imagine if you needed a passport to go, into Yankee Stadium if you're coming from the Bronx. Like, what? Why? Hold on. That seems stupid.
Excuse me, sir. You haven't gotten this stamped properly. I'm afraid you cannot watch the game today.
Yeah, I mean, again, that just in my head exhibits just how pointless borders are, because you don't need to have any real, true marks of separation, so to speak, in it, because there's already enough delineation in and of themselves as neighborhoods.
Right.
know?
Well, and that's also specifically, that's not even something that's regulated or specifically segregated. That's just the way that people operate inside of those neighborhood by neighborhood instances. Which, what do you think about that when it comes to governance and the different ways that people want to be governed? Like maybe people from South Houston put their mustard on the bottom and the mayo on top, and people from North Houston put mayo on bottom and mustard on top.
I mean, the short answer is that, like people from South Houston are godless heathens who must be expunged from the face of the earth. They're subhuman and they're doing things wrong. And I'll bleed to death and defend anyone who agrees with me. How about that? Right? That's a perfectly normal and sane response.
Absolutely. Maybe let's. This is kind of spicy, maybe, but what about like Hong Kong versus the Communist Party of China?
Oh, right. Let's do this.
People have right to self-determination and to choose, what government they want to live under. They should also have the right to draw those borders around themselves and defend those borders if it threatens the way that they want to live. Sam?
That's right, Sam. You take the first swing at this while my brain still processes for a moment.
Characterization, I'd say there's quite a difference between a sort of military or government invasion and the simple passage of immigrant workers or people who want to live in a different area. But if we're talking about the difference between, communist China and Hong Kong, communist China wants to, take over the whole country of Hong Kong, so that's a little bit different than somebody who just wants to move to a new area.
I mean, not even communists can agree whether or not communist China is communist China, because
that's really not anymore, I feel like, but
I mean, there are certain defenders that will on the left that will beat you to death if you say that China isn't communist. So it's this really weird, snake eating its own tail type of criticism. But I think that if a certain group of people are choosing to want to associate to themselves and isolate themselves of their own free will and of that gathering, then, I mean, in an objective sense, there's nothing wrong with that as a matter
it's a
of
difference
principle.
between
But then
people as individuals and people, like a capital people as a group.
Yes.
So that you're involuntarily born into.
Exactly.
Like, there's a difference between a commune where every member decides to go and live on that commune, and a country that somebody's born into and won't easily have the means to escape if they want to, or they just have so many ties that it's unrealistic to expect them to leave anyway, but then they're born into a system that I guess arguably you could say they're tacitly agreeing to live under, but really in no sense is it a true kind of consensual scenario.
You didn't want to be born,
it's a cult,
Mom.
is what it is. I mean, like, borders create this nationalist mentality that then creates a cult-like sense. Because, I mean, if you're born into a group of people who then have isolated themselves and say bad things about everyone else, then, you know, like, that's going to make you inherently believe it because that's what you
you're a
were
product
raised
of the
to think
culture
and
that you
raised not to
raised
question.
in.
Yeah.
So it's more important. What I'm gonna just take a jab at what you're saying here is it's more important for governments and systems of government to not be so specifically protectionist of things like borders or the people that enter and leave, because those are something that is best left to smaller communities.
I don't think it should be left to any community. I think it should be left solely to the individual whether or not to make that decision. I don't think that, you know, a small town should be able to say that they won't accept any foreigners either. That's another disagreement that I have with sort of the Ron Paul wing, is they're big fans of states or local rights, when I don't think there's really any substantive difference between federal government, state government, or local government in terms of tyranny, except maybe that it's easier to escape the tyranny of a smaller area. But in terms of the actual egregiousness of their violation of rights, there's not really any difference there. I don't see a state violating people's rights as any more benign than a federal government doing so.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the people in the Pacific Northwest, the alt-right people specifically have mentioned as one of their goals explicitly, is doing this great movement of where if you have enough people migrate and self-segregate into an area, that then they can literally install a border and then just run off a county sheriff law.
That's pretty much what the state of Oregon was actually
no one's
founded
gonna
as.
tell them otherwise. Yeah. I mean, like, Oregon itself, I got some real issues. Not quite the trailblazers that the basketball team would lead me to believe when it comes to social issues. So, sorry, guys. Yeah, sports season's in full swing. My brain is being poisoned right now, at least until the next Marvel movie comes out. Then I'll only reference that for a few months because I'm a shitty human being who stopped developing past the age of 12. So, but even I recognize that borders are bullshit. So, sorry, where were we?
If my mother doesn't respect the door to my room, why should I respect the border wall of the United States of America? The right of people to self-determine. Maybe let's since we've kind of hit it a couple times, let's talk specifically. Let's talk specifically about immigration and new people coming into an area or a community, and their access to the rights, but their access to the same standard of living, the same economic opportunity, blah blah blah, as all the people that are already living inside of, you know, let's just say a larger country. It's not not that they might have issues integrating within a smaller community, but within the larger role of a country's government itself. You know, what does a country itself have to lose or gain from immigration?
Well, I mean, I think it would be primarily important to first address what people think of when they say that they're worried about open borders, you know, and then we can kind of reverse engineer from there. I don't know, in your circles specifically, Sam, or like what, you know, I'm sure toxic comments you get sometimes on Facebook posts.
Oh, so very many.
But there really does seem to be this very racist component, at least in the United States, that is a very thinly veiled hiding of anxiety, of a fear.
People see that as such just you know, like throwing the race card, that it's just racism that motivates these. And I think a lot, like, of course there are people who will explicitly say that they don't want, you know, Mexicans or whatever other racial group in the country, but
Italians.
more of them, it's they would not say that they do not believe that they're racist. It's like Trump says, "I'm the world's least racist," or least racist person. They don't think that they're being racist, but it's like they just have so many heuristic connections between specific minority groups and crime and poverty and filth that they maybe unknowingly or involuntarily, inadvertently, their motivation is racist, but they don't even acknowledge or realize that that is what it actually is.
It's 2019.
So
Use
up.
Google to read about crime rates. Jesus, Grandma.
I'm not quite sure that's the infograph you should be looking at right now. I don't think insureafutureforOurPeople.org is what you think it is, Grandma. It is not a transhumanist website with a bunch of woke ideology.
Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're worried that I guess it ultimately stems from, and this is where we might have some disagreements, Sam, in the belief in there being finite resources that have already been strained, and so now it's almost dealing with a zero sum. So,
well, no, it's a lot of people look on the country and the influence of immigration through a fixed pie fallacy kind of view, where if we invite more people in, then they're taking more of our resources. That there's only a certain amount of wealth that the country has, and by inviting more people in, that we're just giving more mouths to feed. It's just more people that we have to take care of, and that there will be less for us if we have them.
Yeah, there's only so much gold that can be handed around to everybody.
Yeah, that's what they seem to believe, and it goes as far as jobs too, and that's an argument that you see frequently on the left. There's virtually no Democrat will say that they support open borders, even the ones who are leading the forefront of immigration reform, like AOC and hyper progressives like that. They still will absolutely reject the label of open borders. They do not support that, and a big motivation for them is that they'll take our jobs, that we need to protect American labor from the influence of foreigners who will come in and work at substandard rates and lower the overall wage rate in the country.
Which, unions used to argue about this, and this is kind of another point towards unions not being the end-all be-all of labor movements.
Well, I mean, are you actually arguing that trade unionism may not have been the ultimate evolution of Solidarity's Act? How could you? My Podcasters Guild membership card would beg to differ. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. No, trade unionism is the only way forward. We can only work best if everybody is a part of a union. That is absolutely the only way that a country can function. Remember, don't vote for political parties. Vote for your union representatives,
who will tell you what political parties to vote for.
Yes, absolutely. Another one besides crime and jobs, the thing you hear is taxes, how much we pay in taxes. I don't mean to harp on the libertarian stereotype of taxes.
Well, that's easily where the greatest quote unquote libertarian opposition to open borders comes from, and why you get called a commie or a socialist or whatever other number of things when you suggest open borders in libertarian spaces, because they see that as importing welfare queens, that we're inviting more people in who will take our resources and cost us more in tax dollars.
Yeah, that's what I like to see.
That's exactly what happens when we get people in and contributing to the economy. more welfare people. That's right. Anyways, I'm gonna go accept my Medicaid card because I hate socialism so much. So.
Yeah, and maybe welfare is kind of a social safety nets are kind of a different discussion, but But
again, this is where you can have a fundamental disagreement. You're like, yeah, absolutely, we should get rid of the welfare state. Everyone should seize the means of production. Whoa. One step at a time here, buddy. Okay.
We don't need to seize, our paycheck from the government. We need to seize the resources from the CEOs.
All right, calm down, Bill de Blasio.
Great on the campaign trail. Absolutely wonderful on the campaign trail.
True MVP. Karl Marx is to the right of Bill de Blasio on the campaign trail.
Bill de Blasio is to the right of Ron Paul once he's actually in office, though. So, really, you're sacrificing all of that. You're sacrificing all of that push to the left, on him when you put him on there with other candidates for stop and frisk policies. So.
Yeah. I mean, like, the fact that the cops under Bill de Blasio would only be allowed to stop and frisk 10 yards of linen, that's pretty nice overall. To circle back, though, to what we were previously mentioning here, about why people are worried about immigration and what negative downside as it relates specifically to welfare. I think that welfare is this ethereal concept that we kind of attribute a lot of stuff to. And I don't know, like, again, with who you interact with, Sam, but when people talk about welfare specifically, are they referring to programs, or are they just referring to this idea of like a big old government coupon book, essentially?
Well, it's a big assumption to make that these people have even any idea what programs there actually are or how they work. Like, that they aren't aware that undocumented immigrants don't currently qualify for virtually any social safety net programs, and even legal immigrants do not for 5 years. And in that case, they use these programs at a lower rate than native born Americans do. It's either they don't know these things or do not want to know them, because they will just say, oh, well, that can't be true.
Yeah. What are you saying? That the government is really good at getting its slice of the pie?
No. So when they talk
I'm not
about welfare, I think they just are thinking that these people are living in government provided housing for just luxury apartments that the government provides them, and they're just getting top tier food delivered to them for free, and they're driving a car that they get for free, and they have their Obama cell phone for free, and that they're living large while all of the hard working red blooded Americans are paying for all of it. That these people have their own families to support, but now they've got to put the burden of the immigrants on their backs too, and it's just, we can't handle that.
It's such a bad meme, the Obama phones.
Yeah, that's what they think, though. They think everybody gets just a nice brand new iPhone, and that it's just right on the taxpayer's dime.
Right. Well, and also misdirecting their ire at the people receiving the welfare, and not at the economic system's inability to properly, for them to be making fair wages, and for them to be able to afford everything that they want to live while, working hard. Because everybody works hard. Everybody that works hard should be able to afford, to live the life that they want to live, right? That's the...
okay, sorry. I just want to make a quick point here. I don't mean to harp on this, but even people who are not able to work still deserve to be taken care of. People with disabilities, either physical or mental or what have you, they should be guaranteed some form of a baseline. And the idea of hitting on an immigrant because they are a leech on society, quote unquote, but then be like, oh well, my dad's got a bad back, and so he's been collecting disability for the past 15 years. You feel okay about your dad, but you don't feel okay about an immigrant.
Everybody thinks that they are the exception to the rule. That everybody else, anybody in Middle America who actually uses disability or gets Social Security, or I mean, obviously, like old people get Social Security, but everybody thinks that they're the exception to the rule. That everybody else is lazy and they're faking it, except for them. They're the one real case where they actually need it.
At the entire VA.
Yeah, the VA. That could be a whole different segment. That should be the thing that we talk about with a hell of a way to die.
That would be interesting. We're considering doing like a Dan Crenshaw episode, just because he's such a fuckface.
Also, he has a fucked face. So.
Yeah,
it's low hanging fruit. That's what I'm here for.
The social safety net for soldiers is not effective, and the social safety net for Americans is not effective. Immigrants to blame? Question mark.
I don't even know how that's supposed to sync up.
Yeah, what they do is that they take out this big spinning wheel. Okay, it's like the Jeopardy wheel.
Yeah,
or not
who to
Jeopardy.
blame.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and they spin it, and they're like, all right, okay, let's see what it's going to be. All right, immigrants, yes, that's who it's going to be for the next 5 years. Okay, cool
absolutely,
deal.
Yeah, no, and having more people working inside of your country is definitely not a way to continue, the inherent expansion that capitalism demands. The continuous expansion that capitalism demands, feeding more workers into it, and generating more profits, at every point along the supply chain.
Well, as we were talking about earlier, fusionism is deconstructing, and the conservatives don't necessarily even support capitalism anymore.
Which, and I think I'm gonna just put a name to it. This is all like eco-fascist black pill ideology that is starting to rear up.
Iron pill.
Yes.
I wish I was joking. That's a legitimate term for it, even so.
Thanks, 16 Chan.
That's gonna be awful when it actually comes out.
Yeah.
16 Chan, or as it's known in some circles, perfectly legal Chan.
Oh, no. Definitely not the bad one, is their tagline.
Shh, super secret.
And who do open borders really truly benefit?
Everybody.
Yeah, I would say primarily the working class overall. Simply because there becomes more.
People who believe in free exchange, people who believe in capitalism, or at least proclaim. I guess is it almost safe to say that like people that like claim to be capitalists are trying to maybe distinguish themselves from fascists?
I would like to make that distinction, yes.
But I think that to do that sort of initial grouping is a little haphazard, because it really is, I think. Look at who is opposed to open borders. Like if open borders really benefits everyone, why do we not have open borders? If open borders are this great thing, then what exactly is preventing it from taking off?
Based on what works or will benefit them. They vote based on narratives that they are sold and that they find cultural identity in. It's people obviously vote on emotions and support candidates on emotions, and so when you sell a compelling narrative to people that, if you import people, then they'll destroy your culture and they'll pollute your bloodline and they'll take your money and they'll take your jobs, then that's more compelling to people on an emotional level than any kind of statistics or data will ever be.
Well, and I think that is also, the narrative that has been spun by the money in politics, the narratives that is spun by, by the power that people have because they've accumulated wealth
is
and
it
capital.
the money in politics though? Because Bernie literally says open borders is a Koch brothers, scheme, and that's most people's stereotype of money in politics would be the Koch brothers.
I absolutely do think that the Koch brothers, funding the Tea Party doesn't seem like a reach. I not specifically aware of Bernie's stance on borders.
Yeah, I mean, his fundamental belief is that if immigrants come in with open borders in society as we have it currently constructed, then they would get abused via low wages and then no real safety nets available to them, and then they would become a scapegoat. That's the logic. That's the logic of his argument. But
I think that's more of a positive outlook of his argument than I would give. I think he just doesn't want immigrants because he feels that they'll lower American wages and that he doesn't care about anybody other than Americans.
Yeah, I mean, and that certainly is the other side of the coin. And
we said, trade unionism is not the end all be all of labor movements. So
God forbid that Bernie be wrong on any one single issue. Am I right, people?
Yeah.
Hell yeah! So excited to vote in this upcoming election.
That's also probably like the most liberal take is that these people are going to be hurt if we allow them to be abused, because a lot of liberal talking points are, hey, we need these regulations, and it's like, all right, the regulation, we don't need these regulations because they're addressing a problem. We need the regulations because they're addressing a symptom.
Yeah,
so
I mean, like
falling into
maybe,
hey, these people are going to be, abused for their desire to work for anything to survive because we don't have a functioning, economic system, and we also don't like immigrants because we scapegoat them consistently every day.
It's just what I think is funny is what do they view the alternative at? Like, oh, if they come here, they'll be exploited. That's worse than whatever is happening in Honduras? They're better off there? It's just frustrating. The entire framing of the immigration debate in the country is around the letting immigrants in as some form of charity or something like that. Even, Democrats who love immigration act like they're being the martyr by wanting to increase immigration numbers. That like, oh, I'm willing to take this personal sacrifice because I just believe in helping these people. It's like, if nationalists were intelligent, they would support immigration because immigration is objectively good for our country. Even if you didn't care in the slightest about the plight of these people, it's objectively good for us to have more people. So it's just frustrating that the entire thing is framed around like, oh, are we going to make this sacrifice to let more people in at our own, cost?
Right. There's no fixed pie. We're not giving them a bigger slice of the pie. The dollar isn't real. It has no value. Cost of living isn't tied to wages, and borders don't actually protect anything except for your feelings.
Open borders don't care about your feelings. Is that what you were going with?
Absolutely.
That's the unironic neoliberal pitch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that scarcity can poison a mind, or the belief in scarcity can really poison a mind. And I think that a belief in everyone living in this shadow of American exceptionalism, like what Sam was mentioning, and look at how great we are for allowing these immigrants into our country, is no different than the people like who will go to a Baptist summer camp in Guatemala and then take a whole bunch of photos to appease their white savior complex.
Very much so. That's everybody wants to be the martyr.
Yeah, look what I was willing to do. I was able to subject
look how
myself.
Good I am.
I spent a week in the jungle sleeping under mosquito nets, and I feel so invigorated after getting away from my iPhone.
Like maybe I'm, just too cynical about all of it, but just that seems like the basis for just the vast majority of progressive policy is just like, oh, look at what, I'm so good, I'm willing to make a sacrifice for the benefit of these people, like, or, just, like, I had a post probably 2 weeks ago now that was defending what people call sweatshops, and that was a fun time dealing with the comments with that. But so the reason that people oppose them is because they think, oh, I'm helping these people by preventing them from being exploited. And it's like they don't think about the fact that the alternative to working in these places is subsistence farming in absolute poverty on the brink of starvation. There isn't really a focus on what the actual outcomes of policies are. It's what narrative can I make about how good I am and how much I'm helping and how I'm sacrificing cheaper goods for the benefit of these people, or, like you were saying, I'm traveling to Africa to help them, and it's like, no, you're going there to get a new profile picture is what you're really doing.
I mean, that or female sex tourism, one or the other. I mean, that's an unfortunate downside to the horrible notion of imperialism.
Well, now that Epstein is gone, sex tourism is going to be a great capitalist venture. But anyways, I think that is kind of maybe the opposite side of like outcomes versus justification binary that we've brought up a couple times now. Like the outcome that those people are materially better off than they would be subsistence farming, yes. Is the justification for sweatshops bad? Also, yes. Like the same way that we can say that, that it's not objectively good to work in a sex shop. A sweatshop.
Not that either, probably, but
it's not really good to work in a sweatshop. Is it better? Yeah, probably.
That was what my point was. It's better than the current alternative, and it's the only realistic means of ever achieving something better. Because if you pay people in a sweatshop, even though it's, obviously unfathomably low wages compared to our standard, it is, again, it's higher than what their alternatives are, and a market will arise to meet these people's needs now that they have some small amount of disposable income. So you'll have more businesses arise to fill the demand these people are now creating, and then those businesses will also need demand for labor. And as more businesses form to supply these people with goods and services, then there'll be a competition for labor that will drive wages and working conditions up, and that's how economies work their way out of the poverty. But you can't just cut out the middle. You can't make a jump from subsistence farming to, working in an Amazon office with glorious air conditioning and slides between each floor and foosball and cafes. You can't just make that jump. You have to work your way up through an economy. And in the post-industrial world, we're lucky enough to have been born into an economy where our ancestors have already made that transition. But depriving people in the developing world from making that same transition does not help them. It just traps them in poverty forever.
And I would think that American exceptionalism is, which leads to a belief in imperialism, does not help that in the least. Because when we have this, when we're fighting multiple wars in the Middle East, we're not investing money or resources in markets and helping people, achieve their own, whatever their, dream is.
We can bomb them into prosperity.
Absolutely. These bombs full of American exceptionalism.
Because they're truth bombs, right, guys? That's what it is. Spitting hot bars to the local third world
airdropping Ben Shapiro into the Congo to bring prosperity to the youths by preaching.
I've already made jokes about drone striking various villages using Greg Abbott's legs, so I mean it's not that far off.
Yeah, who you're trading your labor to is unimportant to us as long as you're allowed to trade your labor to anybody anywhere.
Yeah, and I mean that's really at the core. It seems like open borders are the right way to operate under both economic systems.
Yeah, I certainly think so. I think it's extremely strange that more outspoken capitalists and free market advocates, or at least they would claim themselves to be, do not support open borders. I think that's just very bizarre because the benefits to GDP are very clear, and from any capitalist perspective, it seems obvious to support open borders, but that's just so rare among claimed capitalists that it just baffles me, honestly.
I mean, it feels like it's leftovers from McCarthyism and from the decline of trade unionism. Is just kind of weird.
But the same anti-open border sentiment does exist on the left. I mean, it'd be ignorant to say that it doesn't, though. I mean,
those aren't our comrades.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm just saying.
There is enough, on both sides of the middle line, for it to be strange to to us on the bottom to be like, hey, what are we really protecting here? Nothing. We're protecting a fantasy idea that we have of our nationalism, of our exceptionalism, of our cultural boundaries that don't exist, in any real way. They don't exist. Even cultural boundaries don't exist. They've been overtaken by a globalized social
and
world.
Even if they did
online.
exist, I don't see any validity in using force to preserve them. If your culture can't stand on its own, why does it even exist? What value does it have?
Good point. Leave the silence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If your culture is not strong enough to withstand the wily Koch brothers, then your culture just should not exist.
Yeah, it's all that would mean. Like, people try to act like allowing immigrants in is forcing change. It's like all that would be is allowing people to make the choice whether or not to preserve what you perceive as your culture. And if people choose not to do that, how absurd is it to use state force, the threat of violence against people, to preserve your culture that they do not want to uphold voluntarily?
What I'm saying is that the Nazis were bitch made, and they should have waged a culture war, not an actual war.
Well, thank God that people are doing that now. Right?
Absolutely. Thank God nobody else thinks that Nazi ideology is good, and that white supremacy is bad, and that they aren't actively attempting to infiltrate our cultural I guess the ideologues that speak to millions of people every day and have voices larger than this podcast's, that have fans that follow them unthinkingly, and would willingly give up their values, would willingly not even attempt to justify the outcomes that their leaders are screaming down at them. I'm saying is, Fox News sucks.
Fox News and Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern and Laura Ingram and Tucker Carlson. All of the everybody that contributes to white supremacist thought, everybody that contributes to the culture of saying things that sound really cool, but when you start to pick it apart, it just turns out that they're just
yelling nonsense and outright lying in order to sound like they're smart.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think the only actual two reasons to oppose open borders are economic ignorance or racism. Those really seem to be, if you break down any argument, it falls into one of those two camps.
I mean, maybe they also just they want a safe space, huh? Is that way? Is that something we can do? Right?
Hey, look, I already said it. Money isn't real. Something else isn't real. and borders aren't real.
There we go. Yeah, abolish borders to own the libs. How about that?
Absolutely. If you feel unsafe and you need a safe space, put a padlock on your door.
And then that's when
all
they
I got
say,
for you.
if you lock your doors at night, why shouldn't we lock the country's doors?
Oh, God.
That's right. Wrong? No? Hold on. Wait, what side am I for now? I just got so excited.
Lock the country's doors. I want big gates like they have at Minas Tirith, but at every port of entry.
Oh my God, no. I don't really need that. Just a giant like garage door that we're like, okay, everyone, pressing the button as it slowly rolls its way down.
If you can make it inside, you can stay.
It takes 1.5 years to close. Let the race begin.
Oh, God. It only opens once every 20 years.
Now that sounds like a young adult
Check
fiction.
out my new sci-fi. Yeah, okay. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to this new idea. I enjoyed this project. Okay.
Amazon
cool.
bestsellers. If you liked Maze Runner, Hunger Games, you'll love this new young A novel where 3 like indescribably generic characters are all fighting to survive.
Names like Cliff, Brooke, and then like Draquan, and you're like, I wonder which one of our trio isn't gonna make it.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps it up, guys. Sam, thanks for coming. Kelton, thank you for showing up on a work night. I know you're up late anyways, so, and Sam is also a couple hours behind us, so it's not as horrible for him, but this was fun. Sam, of course, runs the Libertarian Memes for Neoliberal Teens page. Take a look. I don't recommend liking it because it'll show up in your feed, and then you'll have to yell at everybody all the time. That's what I do, and it's an experience. Sam is much less of a totalitarian than I am about moderation when it comes to meme pages. So he has some interesting comment sections, but he's you know, it's as long as we're having dialogue, as long as we're able to have dialogue, you know, then I guess it's doing what it's performing the function that we desire from, you know, from an online platform designed to sell us more things on Amazon.
For what it's worth, my philosophy of not banning more people is not some kind of centrist liberal, you know, marketplace of ideas, sunlight's the best disinfectant thing. It's more of like a Hayekian rule of law philosophy about my comment section and on my group as well, that I have specific rules that I have communicated, and if I ban people without having broken those rules, then I am violating the rule of law that I have set forward, and that I'm just using arbitrary authority to get rid of people I don't like. So I have, you know, rules against overt racism or misogyny or Islamophobia, things of that kind, or, you know, Holocaust denial or denial of any genocide or things like that, but authoritarianism is allowed.
Yeah, that's why Zach moderates like Batman, you know, outside the law, mostly at night, striking fear into the heart of people. messaging them before banning them, and then not letting them be able to message back. True brilliance.
Kelton, anything you got to plug? What are we doing this week? What's going on?
All right, so we got two big things to think about, guys. The first one is on Twitch. Be sure to check it out. We're going to have the guys from Does It Slap coming on as we discuss the Carl Urban classic film Pathfinder, because, white savior complex, it exists. Who knows? In Hollywood. It's an awful movie. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. Then we also are going to be having on Sunday the 22nd, so I guess for the Monday-Tuesday recording, it's going to be taking place on the 23rd, 24th, whenever we actually get it to drop. Who knows with the technical issues. We're getting Cold Pizza Party. We had a lot of fun with them going over the Real Housewives of Dallas and analyzing that and just witnessing, manufactured home debauchery, basically. And we're gonna show them what's been going on in the news. So really looking forward to their eyes glazing over into the back of their skulls and going fully black, like all of ours do at the end of every episode.
Now you see Joker face. Yeah. Me in the bathroom putting on my moisturizer, doing the Joaquin Phoenix, like pulling my smile up and letting it slap back down.
We're looking forward to that film. 8-minute standing ovation. It can't be bad, right? It can't be drastically misconstrued whatsoever.
No way. No way, shape, or form. Well, I think that wraps us up. Thanks again for joining us, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And hopefully, maybe we'll be able to do something again with you at some point in the future.
Yeah, you should come on.
Yeah,
you should come on to a main episode. That's a lot of fun. And then, you can actually show people that there are normal, sane human beings out there that aren't just hardcore leftists who demand blood from us. And
see, I too a libertarian. Yeah, that would be very interesting. The episode only gets 10 plays.
No, it would get like 400. It's the one after that we get.
Yeah. We lose our entire
I don't
base.
care. It's worth it. Principles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody out there, and we'll see y'all later.
Deuces.